And if you're looking again at a community where so many people are unemployed and $14,000 doesn't leave much disposable income to go hire an attorney and take it to court. And aside from that, the only attorneys that I've found in the state that are working on coal are working for the industry because that's where the money is. By the time somebody's gone to law school and they got $100,000 in debt, you know, there aren't that many opportunities for people to go out and do pro bono or environmental justice work. They did away with the funding for environmental justice law in the state over a decade ago. And so there are not resources out there, at least where we live. We have searched for years for an attorney, and I've now had to learn how to file appeals twice as an attorney and do it myself. And it was the most miserable experience I've ever been through. Have any of you guys ever been through a deposition? No? Do you know what a deposition is? It's basically where the people that you're filing that appeal against, their attorneys, in this case it was a power plant and they had a whole team of attorneys, can take you off and question you for a prolonged period of time under oath and ask you anything that they want to, and you have to respond. And I had to go through that when I filed the appeal for the siting permit for AMP Ohio, which incidentally just went down 2 days before the day before Thanksgiving. They announced they're not going to build where we are. So, one down, 4 to go. But that was a real interesting experience. It's funny, like I've talked to a lot of people about this, and some attorneys who say they can't represent me, but they empathize. And they just keep saying, well, they violated your rights, they violated your rights. And I'm like, you're right, they violated my rights. But it's kind of like if a tree falls in the woods and there's nobody there to hear it, did it make a sound? There's no difference with your rights. What I'm telling you is that if you have no access to legal representation and your rights are violated and you have no recourse, no violation ever happened. When I sat for that deposition, I was really scared. At first I wasn't because I didn't know what it was. And then somebody told me what it actually was, and because they had accepted my appeal, and I'd given I got what they called standing, which meant that, you know, they were gonna hear the appeal, and because I was both a witness and an attorney, I had several other witnesses in the community. They said that I would have to sit for a deposition, and so I started looking on their website with the Ohio Power Siting Board. It said that if you, through due diligence, had been unable to obtain an attorney, that deposition could not be submitted in a court of law. And so I called the administrative law judge and I said, you know, I don't think I should have to sit for this because you can't accept it anyway, right? So why should I even have to sit for it? It's useless. And he said, well, that doesn't apply to you. And I said, why doesn't that apply to me? And he said, well, because you waived your right to legal counsel. And I said, wait a minute. I said, I never waived my right to legal counsel. I said, it never existed. I said, I never could get legal counsel. There's a big difference between not, you know, saying you don't want something and never ever having access to it. They're totally different things. I said, I never waived my right. I said, I can't get it. And he said, well, we accepted your appeal, and you're the attorney, and you're one of the witnesses. So if you go, your attorney is there, so you need to go. And I was like, holy shit. Pardon my language. I was dumbfounded. And when I went in there, I had just been to this Appalachian Women's Conference up in Zanesville, and I had like a expandable file folder with me, and they had wanted me to put together everything that I'd ever written AMP Ohio's name on, which was a little overwhelming because I don't know, like we had some meeting agendas and stuff like that, but how do you go back through your mind and figure out everything you've ever put their name to, you know, and put it into whatever to give them? So I found what I could, and I put it in that file folder, and I took it with me. And when they turned on the tape recorder and the transcription was there, you know, I said, well, I'd like it put on the record that that I object to this proceeding. I don't think it's legal because I don't have legal counsel. I can't get it. I've never waived that right. I don't have it. And I don't think that I should have to sit for this. And the attorney looked at me and he said, have you ever sat for a deposition before? And I said, no. And he goes, well, let's go off the record. If you ever hear an attorney say, let's go off the record, get your stuff and run out the room, I'm telling you. Just don't even sit there and talk with him. And he said, he looked at me and he goes, I thought he was going to explain what was going to go on to me. That's what I thought was going to happen. And he said, give me everything you've got there. And I said, well, this is for you. I said, I need to separate it from what's mine. And he goes, no, he said, the whole thing is mine. He said, when you walked through that door, everything that was on your person became the property of AMP Ohio. Give me everything that you brought. And he walked around the table and he tried to forcibly grab it from me. and I'm holding it onto like this. And here's this kid my son's age in a suit trying to pull this thing out of my arms. And I wouldn't let go. I was bigger than him, and I won. So he walked back around and kind of straightened up his tie and sat down a little peeved, and he started laying out his leather-bound portfolio. And I thought, good, okay, we got that settled. And as soon as I laid my stuff down, he reached over the table, he grabbed it, and he ran off with all my stuff. I had my purse under my chair with my feet on top of it. I should ask him if he wanted my lipstick, you know? And he was gone for like a half an hour. I have no idea what he took out of that. I still don't know. I had things like a resume. I had a book on craniosacral therapy. I practice Reiki and polarity therapy, and I just graduated from massage therapy school, so pole is not the only energy issue in my life. And I have no idea what he took or what he did. And he even took my pencil and my paper, and he came back in and he told the lady to start turning back on her recording equipment. And he said, okay, now let's get started. And before that, I thought I had rights. I did. I thought I had rights. And it was a real wake-up for me. I mean, it's just like a theater. I don't know how many of you have ever been in court, but they'll be like buttoning up their coats and flipping it over their shoulder, and it's like a theater almost. It's like a play. And it's like they've made all the rules, and you're supposed to try and figure out, you know, it's like they own the whole system. I remember about the third day of it, I figured out that I had to, I could ask questions too. You know, if I was the equivalent of an attorney, then I could ask questions too. And these guys were sitting around the table and they were talking about break cost, which is, if you haven't heard that term before, it's when it gets too expensive to build a power plant and they abandon it. And so when they said, so Ms. Young, do you have any questions? I said, yes sir, I do. I said, I'd like to know if you did a health study. And he said, no. And I said, well, could you go over that break cost thing again? And he said, you know, well, it's when it gets too expensive to build it. And I said, well, what I would like to know is, you know, are you going to do a health study? He said, no. I said, why not? And he said, well, because it won't affect people that way. And that really floored me, because of all the power plants that were proposed in the United States, when you looked at what was going to come out of them, Ohio was the dirtiest. And he's telling me it's not going to affect our health that way. And I said, well, what I would like to know is if you have a term similar to break cost that applies to human life. And he said, I don't know what you mean. It was obvious to me he didn't. And I said, what I want to know is how many of us need to die before you consider it too expensive to build this power plant? And he said, no, we don't have a concept for that. We don't have a word for that. And there were a couple of people in the room that had the decency to gasp. But the attorney, John Bantini, for their side, objected. It's funny. I would say probably half the stuff that got said in that courtroom is actually on the record, because they have reasons they can object, reasons they can remove things, and I have no idea what reason they would have removed that. It was probably irrelevant to them, how many of us would die to equal a megawatt of electricity. But that was struck from the record, but they heard me. They heard me. And so we learned a little bit about break cost. We went around and we gave testimony at the city councils where they were holding their meetings to decide whether to buy into these 50-year contracts or not. And we were there to put a face on the human costs that would be attached to those 50-year contracts. And I had so many city council members say to me, well, we really just can't vote for this in good conscience. And there were so many that backed out that Ohio had to go to Michigan and change state law to make it legal for people in Michigan to buy into those contracts. And they were in the process of trying to do that in Pennsylvania, but they couldn't do it quickly enough, and it got to where it was too expensive and they could not build a power plant. And a lot of it had to do with the students. Like up in Oberlin, they stayed home from power shift and they were having their city council vote, and they made sure that people got elected that actually reflected their values. And we're going to look for other ways to generate their electricity. Yellow Springs did the same. And they were small contracts if you look at it that way, but I look at it a little bit differently, because even though they were small contracts for electricity, what these cities have done is they have taken the responsibility and they have taken the initiative to look at how else they can generate their electricity. And it may be very hard and challenging for them right now, but when this wheel rolls around, they're going to be the ones that have it figured out. And I was just really, really grateful to them for making that decision. I had